This is the Growth Enablement Madness Podcast. And here's your host, Jim Warren. Hey folks, welcome to the Growth Enablement Madness Podcast. This is a podcast where we are focused on how companies can grow via strategy and technologies, and we're absolutely mad about it. I want to see companies grow. We want to be involved with companies that are interested in growing. Believe it or not, not everybody is, and that's okay. But companies that are interested in growing, we have some cool stuff that help you get there. And we talk about how to grow and scale. And there's some differences between growing and scaling. Growing you might think about it as a revenue growth, but scaling for me is the ability to use technologies that allow you to grow without always having to add human capital, and putting humans where they can do their best work, and using technologies where there's repetition and they can help you grow without hiring. And so there's a tipping point at that point, and you become more profitable and you're able to invest more in your company, and the circle continues. So let me introduce to you our guest who's joining me today to talk about how to become a data-driven company. Data being so important today. If you learned anything from the pandemic, you have learned that you need to have data to help guide the company. So Jordan Berry, tell us a little bit about yourself. Nice to have you with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me this morning, Jim. I'm Jordan Berry. I'm an analyst, developer, and data specialist. Some might even call me a data wrangler. But really, my focus is helping customers and companies harness the power of their data. So understanding where their data lives, what data they have, and how they can use it to drive growth. So really that growth enablement theme that we're going to be talking about all day.
That's awesome. I really have found for us, and I often use our company as an example, that, if you're not data driven, if you don't, it's sort of like flying a plane. Right, and if you don't have instruments to tell you if you're straight and level, if you're climbing, if you're diving, if you don't have these proactive instruments, you're in trouble. And without data, or using the wrong data, such as balance sheets, profit and loss, which is a historical document, I think you delay the ability to grow your business. So data is super important. And I'm going to just tell you quickly, for me, we had an evolution, Jordan, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of your comments on this. But we had an evolution in the company whereby we started to realize, about 3 years ago, that we just simply weren't making the best decisions because we weren't using good, predictable data. And we read a book called Traction by Gino Wickman, and we implemented something called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And one of the pieces of that is that we have to have a scorecard for everything we do in the business, everything that's important that tells us something predictive, and so that we can make decisions against that data rather than waiting for it to be too late. Do you see companies doing that same thing today, or are you seeing something else?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say a decade ago, really the mantra out in the tech world was every company is a software company. So everyone was investing in systems, CRM, ERP, et cetera. And now moving into 2020 and beyond, it's really every company is a data company, right? So they've got these systems in place. They're now tracking things. They're collecting this valuable asset of data. And some companies are harnessing it well and using it to make decisions. And some, candidly, the data's sitting on the shelf and they're not using it effectively. And to your point about the, having the dashboard, the analogy I like to make is a lot of companies are driving just using their rear view mirror. They look at reports from last quarter, last month, but they really have no proactive insights, forward-looking insights on where they're going and how they should grow. So it sounds like at least you guys as a company are maybe, right in line with other companies, or maybe even ahead of the mark of a lot of companies. And companies shouldn't feel bad if you're on this journey. It really is a life cycle. There really is no end point. It's just how do you go from using your gut to make decisions to now using data and insights to drive that car or fly that plane.
Yeah, that's a great point. The rearview mirror. I love the rearview mirror analogy. By the way, that's why windshields are so big.
Yeah.
Right, you need to be able to look forward. I'm finding that this has been an evolution, and that, as you mentioned, it was. And I've been in business a long time doing this, 26 years, which puts me way back with some of the earlier technologies, which was contact management, changed to Salesforce automation as an example. Now, customer relationship management. And there's all that data that sits in a database, and really that was being used primarily for forecasting. Some people just simply use it for a Rolodex, but if you do the right things with a database, you can gather a lot of data that will help you. You just have to figure out what the data is. Tell me a little bit about figuring out what the data is, what's going to work. How do you approach a client and figure out what data do they need to be able to measure?
Yep. Well, for me, whenever I approach a customer, it really all starts with the questions you're trying to answer. So really taking it that high level, what's your business strategy? What are the key things you need to know to run your business effectively? And that really helps drive, what data do you need? There's a lot of talk about big data and collecting data. And I think I've seen some customers make the mistake of just trying to collect everything all the time, almost like hoarding their data. But really, if you don't have the right data to make the right decisions, that's where you're going to get stuck. And so it really is understanding, if you're trying to forecast sales, obviously you need sales data, maybe you need some market insights. If you're trying to, make your people the most effective, you really need to understand your internal metrics and your business processes. Or if you're really trying to grow into a new market segment, you need to understand, who are your best customers, who's the most profitable, how do you find more customers like that. So it really starts at that high strategy level. But then it really is understanding, okay, what data do you have today? What data gaps do you have? That's what I love about this, is just there's so much discussion around the business side, and the data really just helps support where you're going.
Yeah, I was thinking about even with us focusing on this, we're a growth enablement company, which means we help companies grow and scale by leveraging technologies, right? So when I look at folks from an ICP, or ideal client profile, customer profile, in this data segment, we have in our company ERP capabilities, we have marketing automation, we have CRM, we have customer support, and of course the BI tools that you'll use to measure. But I seem to think, this is my theory, that companies that range from 30 to 150 million typically have great data, but they haven't spent the time really managing the data or finding ways to manage the data to help them grow. Now, certain companies who have the scale may have departments and capabilities to do that, right? I think it's the 30 to 150 million dollar company has the data, have the desire to grow, but perhaps are not using it. Do you agree or disagree?
I do, yeah. And maybe just add one more ingredient to that too, is that we're seeing a lot of a best of breed approach these days.
Yeah.
So traditionally, you would buy into a particular technology stack, everything, Microsoft, Oracle, etc. And now people are picking the right tool for the job. So you might pick the right tool for sales, the right tool for marketing, but now you have different types of tools that store their data differently. How do you pull that data together, connect it, blend it, so that you can get those insights? And it's really unique, just because the way we look at data is there's really kind of three value propositions of data. You either use data to make better decisions, to drive growth, top line growth, which is really where kind of BI analytics live.
Hmm.
You then may use it to increase your operational efficiency, so lowering costs, making sure you're more efficient, more productive. And then the third piece of data is really just the value of data itself. So if you have some sort of unique data set, so that's how I like to kind of split it into three ways that companies can think about how do we leverage this data? Are we driving growth? Are we lowering costs? Or are we just trying to collect data for the value of data?
So you're making. I'm sorry if I'm going in different directions. You're making me think. So I have got two questions. One is, you've got all these buckets of data. We mentioned marketing, we mentioned sales, you mentioned finance, and all of it perhaps has relevancy for a data-driven company.
Mm-hmm.
How do you bring it together? And then how do you measure it? Does it matter what technology you use to measure it and create dashboards? And where do you put this data to get it from? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. This kind of goes to my background. I come from more of the software development approach, so that's how I really got into data and AI and machine learning. And traditionally, you would create these point-to-point integrations. So you hire a developer, they custom code. I'm going to connect my CRM and my marketing system.
Mhm.
And once you start to realize is after you create 5, 10, 15 of these point-to-point integrations, you start to realize that you have some data in some places, but it's kind of all over the place at the same time. You can't get that 360-degree holistic view of your company.
Mhm.
And so that's where some of these more modern data approaches like data lakes, data warehouses come in. How do you pool all the data in one place so you can run these ad hoc analysis type questions on top? So it is interesting. It's a challenge. And some companies, especially if they've been started in the last 10 years, have the advantage of being able to start with a data warehouse in mind. But
Yep.
if traditionally that wasn't in vogue, and now you have a lot of different systems. You have to figure out, how do we get this data in a place that we can analyze it and understand it. So yeah,
Are you,
it is a
are,
bit of a challenge, but
are you saying that data warehouses or data lakes are the places that you store this data and then measure from?
yeah, so a lot of times you'll pool the data into something like a data lake or a data warehouse,
Hmm.
and then from there you'll run your analysis. You'll answer your questions. You'll create the dashboards, things of that nature. I've seen that as the kind of the main approach that people are taking these days, is moving data into the data warehouse. There are some challenges, caveats with that as well, and there are some more modern approaches,
Okay.
where you kind of read some data in real time, some data is cached. Um, but really, it's all about, how do you get the data together so you can look at your business, across department, across system.
Yeah, I'm just thinking as well. You think about some of the major solution providers out there. Salesforce bought Tableau. Microsoft has Power BI. Sugar bought a company called Corvana, and I think a recent acquisition called Node for artificial intelligence. So everybody seems to be jumping into this. Um, does it matter which data tool you use? Can a Salesforce customer use Power BI? Can a Sugar customer use Tableau? Can you mix it up?
Short answer, I would say yes. Our approach is always, it's about the people, the process, and the technology follows, right? So
Yes.
if you don't understand your people, if you don't understand your processes, where you're going, ultimately the tech isn't going to be the thing that makes or breaks you. But once you get to that stage and you are deciding on what technologies do we pick, there obviously are pros and cons with everything. So I would say, short answer, the technology isn't going to make you succeed or fail, but obviously there are certain aspects of certain technologies that tend to do better than others.
So what do you do when you get with a client of ours? How do you determine which technology to use? Is there some things you look for?
Yeah. So for me, the one of the big things is, as simple as data volume, right?
Okay.
Talks about big data as just one big pool of data, but some companies aren't really big data. Maybe they're kind of medium to small data, and they need some quick, fast tools that let them get insights quickly. If you're a company like Netflix or Amazon, where you have petabytes of data, obviously that's a different need than kind of your mid market, 50 to 150 million revenue companies.
Hmm.
So it really is about, return on investment. How quickly do you want to get to insights? How much budget do you have to pull this data together and access it? So that's usually where I start, is data volume, budget, and then timeline are kind of the three main factors.
And I said for us, a client profile might be between 30 million and 150 million. But take a smaller company. Have you worked with smaller companies that are excited to use data, and can it make a difference for a smaller company, 10 million, say?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, that's actually where a lot of the value lies, because when you're right in that range, you're going from kind of manual processes or ad hoc. Maybe you're pulling data into a spreadsheet and doing some reporting every month, and now you're starting to automate and aggregate those with technology. And so I would say there's a ton of value there. And you may not even have to go the full data lake, data warehouse approach. There are some simpler tools that connect to your systems, let you pull together that data, blend it, and then gain insights. So tools like Power BI, Tableau have
Yeah.
some basic data modeling techniques inside of them, and then there's a lot of options for companies that size as well.
So, here we are using some Power BI, or we're using Power BI for some of our data analysis. And just yesterday, it's interesting that it's amazing what the data tells you,
Mhm.
and the confidence it gives you to make a decision. So this is my example. Just yesterday, we were looking at by sales rep over the course of previous year to current year. How many opportunities did each rep have? Right,
Mhm.
and the volume of opportunities. I was looking at one rep who perhaps had, for a period of time, by the way, had tripled over previous year, and we had a little breadcrumb that was telling us that do we have a capacity issue? And
Mhm.
just looking at the data just reinforced the fact that we need another AE.
Yeah.
They're at capacity. Just that simple little piece of having that data allows us to make that decision. And of course, what we're going to be doing is hiring somebody now to help relieve that, because I think the more time somebody has to spend on a deal, being consultative, the better off the client will be, so that we take the time with them so that they can make the right decision. So it's a story for me. But I'm going to ask you a similar question. Do you know somebody that we've worked with recently, and perhaps you can't share their name because of our NDAs, that is winning because of the use of data? And I don't mean Charlie Sheen winning. I mean winning as a company.
Winning as a company. Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen, several companies start their journeys, and we've helped them throughout the process. And one that comes to mind is a distribution company. They have a really interesting backstory. They started out as a food truck and then became a kind of a wholesale coffee distributor. They would keg coffee. So they would, for cold brew or regular, and they distributed to different offices. And what was really unique is they had already invested in systems. So they had an ERP system, a marketing, a sales system, but they really had no insight into the full life cycle of their customer. And so one of the really unique questions they had was, when we run out of coffee, how do we let our customers know? How do we alert them that, hey, their favorite brand of coffee is out this week? And how do we create that good customer experience? How do we be proactive versus reactive?
Right.
A lot of times, it's out, somebody will just grab something out of the warehouse, throw it on the truck, and you have an unhappy customer, lower lifetime values. And so what we were able to help them with was to pool the data from their ERP system, from their marketing system, from their sales system, and even from a custom system they built in their warehouse. And so we can start to give them some more real-time alerting. So actually, each of their drivers had an iPad with some insights that they could pull from some dashboards, and that let them be super proactive with the customer. And we're seeing that they're getting, it's much stickier. They're having less churn. They're able to drive growth. So all positive things came out of this initiative.
I love it. I love that stuff, and I love where all this technology is taking us, and the thought leaders, yourself included, getting involved with customers and helping them understand how important this is and what things to be looking at. So, Jordan, we recently did a webinar on 6 steps to becoming a data-driven company. I would love to ask you a little bit about what we discussed there, what those 6 steps were, and then I also know that we're offering a free consulting. I think it's 15-minute project where we review the data. Tell us a little bit about what we're providing for folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me touch on the 6 steps real quick, and
Yep.
then I'm happy to follow up kind of with the offering. But yeah, really the 6 steps to becoming data driven is the framework that we've created after working with dozens of companies, and it's really just a holistic approach on how do you go from this really chaotic, I've got a bunch of data, don't know what to do, to actually taking action. And so I'll just walk through the steps real quick, but essentially it starts with understanding the business. Being able to align both your people, the processes, and the technology you have. You have to know where the data that you have lives in your organization. And then you start to look at technology. So how do you connect the data, blend it? How do you get those insights through things like visualizations or KPIs? And then ultimately, how do you take effective action, which I think you talked about earlier, is you saw an insight on your Power BI dashboard, and that meant you needed to hire somebody. And that's really where the magic of data happens, is you get an insight and then you take an action, and it helps drive growth. And so what we're offering as part of this is we'll do a quick review of where you're at on this 6-step journey. So really quickly, within about 15 minutes, have a conversation. We can understand, what are the key business challenges you're having? Can we guide you on where to start? And if you don't have time to talk to us, we also have a checklist that you can download and take. It's on the BrainSell website. So it walks you through the checklist, and you can kind of gauge yourself, how far along are you and your organization on becoming data driven. So a lot of really good information packed into a simple checklist.
So we'll make sure that folks know that they need to go to our website to find that resource tool. So if you don't want to have the conversation, which I encourage you to, because it really is a non-selling discussion. It's a discussion about data, and then your choice whether you think it's important to do something about your data. But the other way to do that is to download this tool, which will give us a sense of where you're at. Is that right?
Yep,
Or
absolutely.
does it score it out where they're at? Is there red, yellow, green?
Yeah, it's fairly introspective, so it really kind of just takes you through some of the key aspects of becoming data driven. But I think you'll pretty quickly tell if you're answering yes to most of the questions, you're probably on the right track. If you're answering no, probably should have a conversation with us.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. Do we have any? And I think we do. So I'm probably seeding you here. What's our special sauce tools that we have?
Absolutely. So we've developed some different frameworks. So we have there's a tool that we use called Interloop, which is actually a great platform for connecting data, gaining insights. We use other tools like ELT tools like Skyvia, Fivetran, and then we also use data warehouses, so things like Redshift and Amazon Synapse. So a lot of great technology we can pull together, and candidly, we have deep expertise across the board. So when you get to that technology step, we have the experts that can help you get there.
Perfect. And you have a group of data scientists too that'll help with the data manipulation and understanding what data?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
We get very hands on, both from we set the strategy, but then we can help you execute as well, getting down to the nitty gritty of actually massaging and wrangling that data.
So this has been wonderful chatting with you, and I want to let the folks know who are listening that try to go to the or don't try. There do or do not Yoda. Go to the website, pull down those tools, connect with us on having your free assessment, and let's get you data driven, because it's like being in the dark and trying to hit your target if you don't become data driven, or flying an airplane without any instruments, likely to crash. So this is very important to us. We really want to be connected with you, each of you, to see how you grow. We want to be a part of your journey. So Jordan, and Jordan, by the way, is part of our data group, and this is a really important initiative to us. Jordan, any parting thoughts before we close out today?
Yeah, only final words would be that becoming data driven is a journey. It's a
Yeah.
process. So the sooner you get started, the sooner you're going to see insights. So yeah, I just urge people that, especially in today's climate, understanding your data is really key to both growth and retention. So yeah, get started today.
And that was my experience too. The first step is the hardest step,
Mhm.
and that's number one: deciding what data is important to you. The next step is, where is the data?
Mhm.
Right? And bringing it together, and then it's measuring the data. So the first step is the hardest. Once you start this journey, it will be a consistent journey. There's no one stopping point. You will become, I know this sounds weird, you're going to become super excited once you see some of the data and the insights that you get, as we are. I mean, we get it and we go, oh my gosh, we make a decision against the data, and the risk now, it becomes very low on making those decisions, particularly where you're spending money and investing in a business. So what I have noticed, though, it is a journey. We
Mhm.
started with certain data, then we looked at it and said, perhaps we need other things. We add on to it. Some things go away because maybe they're not as important, but we have now a consistent journey that we're constantly on, looking at continual improvement via data. So this is the Growth Enablement Madness Podcast. I want to thank Jordan Berry for joining me today. My name's Jim Ward. I'm CEO of BrainSell, and please check us out. We want to understand how we can help your company become a better company by doing business with us. Thank you.